The real reason that I think I need to be in the Senate in 2010 is because of what's likely to happen in 2012. People say that, they credit me for predicting the economic collapse, the economic crisis, but when they say that, they just assume that it's all over, right? That my predictions have already come true, but the reality is it's barely started. I mean, what's happened so far is the collapse has begun, and it's begun exactly the way I said it would begin, but there's a lot more to my predictions than what's happened thus far. And I think by 2012, it's going to be obvious to everybody that we're in a depression, and the nation is going to be at a real critical crossroads. We're going to need to understand the root cause of our problems. So we're really going to need to have real change, right? Barack Obama won the White House promising change. So I know you can win on a change platform. I mean, he didn't deliver any change. The only thing he changed was the size of the mistakes. He's making them bigger. But he's following George Bush's policies. Ben Bernanke is doing exactly what Alan Greenspan did. I mean, look at all the damage that Alan Greenspan caused with a 1% interest rate. Imagine what we're going to do with 0. And all the terrible things that Alan Greenspan did as Fed chairman. He didn't buy subprime mortgages. He didn't buy credit card debt. He didn't buy student loans. I mean, so we're making all these mistakes only on a bigger scale. And as bad as the Bush deficits were, few hundred, they were nothing compared to the Obama deficits. I mean, what, $1.8 trillion in 1 year? It wasn't too long ago where the entire budget wasn't $1.8 trillion. Now that's the deficit. And look at the projections from the OMB for the next 10 years. The deficits are $1 trillion a year. That's their forecast. I said, how could you have a forecast? How can you come out with that with a straight face? You figure if you're planning your budget and you see that it's $1 trillion deficit for the next 10 years, you say, hey, wait a minute, guys. We got to redo this. We got to cut some spending. We can't proceed with this. But no, this is just what it is. I said, it's like, your kid comes home from school and he says, Dad, here's my plan for the next 10 years of studying. I'm going to flunk every course. And you say, okay, yeah, let's go with that plan. You can't have a budget. You can't assume that we can borrow $10 trillion from the Chinese and the Japanese and the Saudis and they're going to lend it to us. I mean, why would they do it? We can't pay back the money we've already borrowed. They're going to lend us that money? There's no way that the country can function for 10 years with these deficits. So before that 10-year period comes, we're going to have the real crisis. We're going to have the real crisis that I wrote about in my book and I've been talking about. So we have to let the American people understand why the economy is in such a mess and that the government isn't going to fix it. They can't fix it. The only way to fix it is to let the market function. The world is now contemplating the possibility of lending us so much money. Remember, these budget deficits that we're proposing, right? The world is expected to finance it, right? And people think, well, the Chinese, they'll never stop lending us money because they already have $1 trillion. They can't afford to stop because then they'll lose all that money because the dollar will collapse. And of course, I don't even know why our politicians can't even fathom that. Wait a minute. If the Chinese won't lend us money, the dollar collapses. They should already be nervous. But I don't think the Chinese are thinking about the $1 trillion that they've already loaned us. They're thinking about the $5 trillion that we've got them penciled in for over the next few years. What about that? The best way to not lose that money is not to lend it to us. And I think once the dollar cracks through some key support levels, I think about another 10% drop in the value of the dollar from here, and we can be looking at a real crisis. Because then the dollar could start to fall much more rapidly. And of course, when that happens, you're going to get very substantial increases in prices. It'll happen first in the commodity markets, such as energy and agriculture, but very quickly those increases will show up in consumer prices. And you'll also see rather abrupt increases in interest rates. And that's when the crisis really kicks into high gear. Because what have we done in the last year? We've leveraged up the economy even more. Even though certain companies have less debt, the government has much more debt. Even families that have managed to pay off some debt, it doesn't matter because the government has taken on even more debt in their name. So now we're even more vulnerable to an increase in inflation, an increase in interest rates than we were before. Right? What's going to happen? You've got the federal government with this gigantic national debt, and we finance the national debt with T-bills. Right? We did exactly what the subprime borrowers did with their mortgages. We've got a teaser rate. We've got an adjustable rate mortgage on the national debt. We don't have 30-year Treasury bonds out there. Now, when people bought houses with their T-bill, with their teaser rates and their ARMs, they did that because in the short run they got a low mortgage payment. They were able to buy a house they couldn't afford. But the problem was when rates eventually rose, they couldn't afford to make the payments. That's the exact same position Congress is in. They're borrowing short. Why are they borrowing short? Because long-term rates are much higher. Yeah, they're higher, but they're still low. Why not lock in 4.5%, 5%? Because they can't afford it. They need the teaser rate at 1%. Well, what happens if interest rates are 10%? Well, if interest rates are 10%, we could be looking at $1 to $2 trillion a year in annual interest payments on the national debt. Well, that's not even possible. We can't extract that kind of tax revenue, especially in the recession that we would be in if interest rates were 10%. Who would have a job? Who would they tax? What would houses be worth if mortgage rates were double digit? That is the problem that they've created. By postponing the pain, by bringing us deeper and deeper into debt, it's that much worse. I mean, that's why when I'm saying we gotta go through this recession, it's not because I'm happy about it. It's because the alternative is worse. It's, sometimes I said, if you're sick and there's some foul-tasting medicine, it doesn't mean you don't take it because it doesn't taste good. You hold your nose and you take the medicine because you understand that that's how you're going to get healthy. And unfortunately, the only way to cure this sick economy is for the market to administer that recession. And the government and the politicians, they don't want it. Because they want to get reelected, just like George Bush didn't want it, right? He wanted to get reelected. Well, he got reelected. And look at the mess that we're in because of that. Now, Barack Obama's the same thing. Nobody wants to level with anybody. Nobody wants to allow these recessions. And so, as I said, we're going to overdose on government stimulus. And the overdose is going to be massive inflation, potentially even hyperinflation. Anyway, and if we have that hyperinflation, I mean, everything that we're looking at now, I mean, this is all, the overture. I mean, the opera, what's coming in this economic crisis is going to be devastating. It's going to be worse, I think, than the Great Depression of the 1930s because it's going to be an inflationary depression. And that's the main reason that I think I need to get to the U.S. Senate to try to head off that worst-case scenario, to try to get the politicians to understand that they have to change course, right? That we have to turn this car before we go off the edge of a cliff. Barack Obama said that. He was quoted as saying, that when you're going in the wrong direction, you got to change course. When you're driving towards a cliff, you got to change course. Sure, the problem is Barack Obama stepped on the gas. And we're going to hit that cliff a lot sooner unless maybe I can get into the Senate and talk some sense into our leaders and to stop it from happening. And that hopefully the people in this room can help make that happen because I can't do it by myself. Anyway, thanks everybody.